Hello, everybody, and welcome to Overturning Tables, the podcast where we take progressive theology from concept to practice. My name is Jonathan Bradner. This is
Terry. God, my name for a second is so weird.
This is a very special Christmas episode, and you can tell that because
Christmas.
we have a decor. How are you doing, Derek?
I'm all right. Other black people would say fair to Midland. That to me like I'm doing fair to mid.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's where I am. How about yourself?
Mid to Fairland.
That works.
Is that a thing?
Yeah.
I'm in like this season, and by season I mean like a week, where there's a ton of great stuff and a ton of like bad stuff and very little in between. So it kind of cancels itself out. But like I can't complain, nor can I like be overjoyed right now, I guess you could say. I don't know.
And it's also like the Super Bowl of pastoring.
Yeah.
Like before Easter, because the way the days fall. Do you all have a Christmas Eve service?
We do.
So it's like Sunday, Tuesday, Sunday. Like it's
a quick turnaround.
Yeah.
Last year, Christmas was on Sunday, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah, because we ended up doing worship during Christmas Eve at the normal time.
Did you have Christmas Eve and Christmas?
No.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's real good.
Just the one. Well, everybody, what this episode is going to be about is we're going to talk about, well, I would like to talk about anyway, sort of creating non-violent alternatives when things like the shooting of the CEO of UnitedHealthcare happens. And there was a lot of reaction to that and praise, and I would say valid praise, but also just like that internal pulse of like, is violence ever okay? Does it ever have a place or a space in progressive theology or the church at all? But before we get to that, we have a fun little sheet here. You can follow along, but you don't have to follow along. We have officially the comment section.
Oh,
yes.
This is not read one single comment.
Have you watched one single video?
Yes. I try to stay away from comments. Like, I'm like, I get really not emotional, but I can be very sensitive to, and then I can lash out really hard at negative stuff. So I just stay away from it.
Ooh, I can lash out.
Yeah.
I can lash out. But sometimes I feel like, I don't know, there's like a righteous way to lash out.
Yeah, and I go low.
You go low every time.
Every single time.
I think we're in a season of like reclaiming Christianity, where there are people who have been ostracized by the church who need to see people doing that. I could be totally wrong. That is just my sense being online, what little online I am and whatever little presence I have, is that some of the most affirming comments are when I make a video where I don't let that, like when I don't let the bully be the bully and I say something and I clap back.
Yeah. I can see that. And I'm not that person until I'm not, because then I'm like, these people get on my nerves. They don't deserve my awesomeness. And then I'll take a hiatus, which is perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm almost never clapping back for that person. You know, I'm never like, I could care less how they, like, it just happened on my own TikTok where somebody just typed the word repent into the comment section. And I made a clapback video and I used a swear word. I said, that's bullshit.
I love Jesus, but I cuss a lot.
Yeah.
Right?
A lot. Me too. But like, it was bullshit. Like,
yeah.
Even in my response video to him, I was just like, you're not even being a good conservative evangelical, because by just posting repent in somebody's video, I'm not actually going to do that. Nobody's going to do that. You've gained 0 souls in your fight for kingdom. Like, you've done nothing productive here other than to like create more division and wedge. And so I called him out on it. I was like, this is bullshit. This is even like, according to your theology, this is lazy.
Yeah. Which most people are.
That's true.
Yeah. We just, the coalition just Open and Affirming Coalition is a LGBT nonprofit, services the church and beyond. We just had a postcard to go out, big postcard. And of course, you send out 7,000 postcards. It's going to addresses that are no longer that recipient. That's just how it happens every single time. And so some conservative folk got our postcard, which is saying, you know, Project 2025, it's crazy and it's going to hurt LGBT people and we need your help to donate. And people, of course, I get the emails when people go to the website and it's, you know, what type of church are you? A bunch of, you know, bad words. And yeah, it's crazy.
It is crazy.
And I'm like, to go through, like, it's so easy just to put doesn't live here, return to sender. So, like, but to go to our website, to go find contact, to sit there and type out a whole thing, like, I just prayed for them because you have nothing else to do.
And then do you actually pray for them?
I actually do.
Nice.
I'm like, and you know, it's not the most beautiful prayer. I'm like, oh Lord, let's fix it. Like, this is their life. It's Advent, and this is what they're doing. Jesus is happy.
Mm. So the first comment that I'll point us to is by somebody named C3PO.
Do I like C3PO or not?
You do. C3PO
With I love C3PO.
So would like to know, do you have a reading list by chance?
Me?
Well, I think it was to either of us. I wrote some down because I had time to prepare for this, but I didn't know.
I mean, does it have to be like this, like in relation to this topic? I guess it should be. One, The Radical King by it's edited by Cornel West, but it's the radical side of Martin Luther King, which is awesome. And it's a bunch of his speeches. It's a bunch of his speeches and writings. And usually when people talk about Dr. King, they talk about the dream and they, you know, talk about a very specific part of the I Have a Dream speech. But the name of the speech on his piece of paper was actually Normalcy No More. It says, we come to our nation's capital to cash a check that has come back marked insufficient funds, but we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. That's the speech we're supposed to remember. Not when he goes into his preacher cadence of I Have a Drink, which is beautiful, but The Radical King, The Fire Next Time, James Baldwin, a lot of James Baldwin stuff. I Am Not Your Negro. It's weird. It is a book, but it's actually a documentary that Amazon did. Those are three I'm bored with.
Nice. I have written down, of course, The Cross on the Lynching Tree.
James Cone.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which has some more stuff to reconcile with still. Like it that is like your base level of liberation theology. And then there is Theology of Liberation by Gustavo Gutierrez. I won't read my whole list. Let me just, I am a huge student of Reverend Dr. William Barber. So
I was about to say anything by Dr. Barber.
Yeah. Moral Mondays and Beyond is like a practical look at like what you can actually tangibly do. I really like Making a Way Out of No Way by Monica Coleman. Essentially because that was my introduction to womanist theology for the first time. So I think that's a really good one for just expanding.
I would put Daughters in the Wilderness on there too. Stacey Floyd Thomas.
And then what's another good one? Politics of Jesus. Do you like that one?
Who wrote it?
John Howard Yoder.
I have read half of it.
Yeah. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's another one that's just like kind of a conversation starter. I wouldn't agree with all of it.
There's James Cone is another one for like James Cone, William Barber, and Martin Luther King are my big three. And Stacey Floyd Thomas, Daughters in the Wilderness with that womanist theology, and I got to witness her do a workshop early in my ministry. So it was this life changing, but pedagogy of the oppressed, it's still different. But again, that's more some of the practical stuff and not necessarily theology. theology, but it works.
I had a really great seminary experience when I went to United Theological of Twin Cities, because our liberation theology professor, he layered the liberation theology. So we started with the lynching treaty, and then kept going on from there, like building onto it until we finally got to womenist theology. And it was a really interesting way to critique how the one before wasn't enough. And when you get to a place where you are able to start wrestling with James Cone, like, and not agreeing, and suddenly like seeing like where his blinders might have been, like you're really hitting it.
In the theology nerd in me, there's a book, God, I can see the cover of the book. I just can't think of the name of it. And it's about W.E.B. Du Bois as a prophet, which is interesting because he really lived his life in a non-religious way. I mean, there's a story that he got removed from Wilberforce when the president asked him to pray, and he was like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, he was very anti-religious, but quite spiritual in his writings. And he's like a reluctant prophet. Like, no, I'm not this person, but so much of what he writes, and I can see the name of it. We'll get it for you. So I like books that aren't necessarily theology books, but God is all in the midst.
Yeah, for sure. I get that.
Yeah,
because that's like life.
Yeah,
it's like one of my my super white self really likes this band called Need to Breathe. Have you ever heard of them? Need to Breathe is like this.
I should my head know
southern. Yeah, it's like this southern kind of rock band that I'm sure some folks have a problem with for whatever reason, but I really always just appreciate it because when they come out with an album, like half of the songs are faith-based and the other half is just like life. And I've always appreciated that because it's just like, that's life. Like, that is the life we all live. Is like, some things we're going through is our faith, and some things is just like, I fell in love with this person.
And that's the way I've always ministered. And that's why it was hard to find, like, it's hard to find a church to serve sometimes when you don't want to always be pastorally or churchy. Like, I'm just so nuanced, which everybody is, but some people don't feel comfortable like expressing that. And being a Black person in a pretty white denomination and serving a mixed church, but mostly white, that was always a balancing, like how much of myself could I be and do it safely, but then keep my job, and you know, like it's all very nuanced.
Sure. The next comment we can go through came from a TikTok video. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember which podcast
it was. Negative comment.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Good.
We're coming.
No. I don't want to get like. I'm not rushing it. I'm glad. Yeah.
Well, I titled this TikTok snippet of one of our podcasts as Christian Education Beyond the Bible, a New Perspective. And this is where you talked about opening up Christian education in our churches needs to be more than about the Bible.
Hallelujah.
Right. And so a funny one, that's their name, which is really ironic considering what they're going to say.
It might be what they do.
What they said, do not use your pulpit as a political tool. Politics is of this world, not his heavenly kingdom. Serve the Father, not the world! !
Yeah, Jesus was no way a political figure at all. Like, who followed Jesus?
Yeah.
He had no political power.
None. No. His death wasn't political. His birth wasn't political.
And it's so funny because I don't remember what I said, but when I say Christian education is beyond the Bible, I don't just mean politics. I mean like life skills and self-care and history, which is not, not always political, but anytime, preacher told me once, anytime there's more than one person involved, there's politics. So
Yeah, like almost by definition.
What do we have for dinner? I don't know. I want this. I'm not really feeling that. What about this?
Yeah.
And then we come to consensus and we go get like,
yeah,
it's super weird.
I have people in my life, I have done like Bible studies on like political theology who are just like, who will concede that, but then they'll still say, we still can't call it politics. Like, just, I get it. Like, I get what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
I get everything's political, but I'm not calling it politics.
Because it's like people who don't want to be called Christians, even though they are. But it's because of the negative connotation that it has. I remember the first time I started talking about politics in a church meeting, and people got, they're not all people, but there were a couple people who got, what do we do? And I'm like, when I say politics, don't think I'm trying to convince someone to do what I want them to do. That's not what I'm saying. I think that's what some people think. So what I'm saying is, if we see something that needs to be done, we have to figure out in the culture and climate and context of this church how to make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a way to do that it can be a beautiful thing. It can be a harmful thing. But how do we do that? How do we do that without scaring or offending? How do we do that? Because we know this thing we want to do is beneficial and it needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a way to do it.
Yeah.
And so,
right.
Well, talking to clergy, and sometimes that are really passionate about, we need gender neutral bathrooms, we need this and we need that. And so they're just like, it's the right thing to do, so we're just going to do it. But again, there's a way.
Listening sessions,
exactly.
Talk. Right.
And
which is what I appreciate about the Open and Affirming Coalition, is because it's not a single decision. It's a process.
Absolutely. And if it's, and every church will say, not every church, but most churches will say, oh, we need you to visit our church. We're not ready. I'm like, nobody's ever ready. That's the whole point. Like, you're not ready until you have the conversations and you go through the process. And if you're not ready, then you don't vote. You keep talking, you keep figuring it out. And maybe it took my church 20 years to get there. And then they weren't going through the process for 20 years. Someone introduced it to them, 25 years beforehand. They weren't ready. They didn't even start the process. Then they hired a gay black man. And I was like, hey, why are we not open and affirming?
Yep.
Like, we are, but we're not. And then when the much more conservative Presbyterian church around the corner from us put up a pride flag, I was like, are we really going to let them beat us?
Not that it's a competition, but come on.
And so, yeah, like we actually are doing this, but what does it mean? And I also understand the price that one pays for stepping out of the closet as a church or as a community.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Threats.
Yep. A funny one sends you comments about.
Yeah. And I mean, like, if there's any nuance, I'm looking at this, I'm wondering if they are just finding, I'm giving them grace here, and just wondering if they very specifically put the pulpit in here. Is there an argument made that maybe church activity, sure, but like what you preach about from the pulpit itself?
And what I preach about from the pulpit is never political. It might be political, but it's never political. When I prepare a sermon,
it might be political, but it's never political.
When I'm preparing a sermon, I'm not saying, oh, these are my politics and this is what I need to say. Now, somebody might receive it, but what I'm preaching is, like, I cannot, when I read the gospel, the liberation theology in me, I've come from the denomination where James Cone was ordained. And so I would see him at national meetings and talking that he was AME. And 50 sermons a year that I heard as a child until I started preaching when I was 19. And like, I cannot read the Bible and not see some type of liberation in the text. Like, it's there. Like, I see hope, peace, love, joy, justice. Like, I see these things. And so when I'm preaching, that's the lens that I'm preaching through. It's never, hey, I want you to, but then some people will hear that and say, oh, you should be talking more about Jesus. And then their idea of Jesus is just, God is love, love is God. We should all be good people and go to church on Sunday and then go home. But Jesus overturned the tables. Why did Jesus do that? So you see, they might hear that as political. I'm just preaching the gospel.
Yeah.
My theology. You don't have to agree, but that's what it is. Like, I'm not seeing, there's an election coming up. How can I influence the people to, this is not what I do.
I've pointed out when politics have done harm.
And they do.
I've preached about that from the pulpit. So I guess that would be, very political.
And I would call that a moral obligation as a pastor to bring up.
So, but this is where I'm wrestling with you then. Like, so then why would you say you've never, it might be political, but you don't preach politics?
Because I'm not preaching politics. I'm preaching the gospel. Things happen in the gospel that resonate with what's happening in the world today. But this is not my pushing back against the politics. It's saying this is right, this is wrong. It's not political.
See, I disagree. I think it's political.
See, I'm like,
I think that there's a clear distinction between playing the game of politics and the recognition that some things are political in this world. Most things are political, as we've already talked about. So I don't know that distinction is all that necessary. Because we're trying to apply it to our real world, the real world that we're living in, which is political.
Yeah, I see that, but no.
Okay, fair enough. No, I think that's great. I mean, that's
absolutely. It's like, oh, I'm preaching the gospel, and some people say, oh, that's political. No, this is my interpretation.
I can see where, like, you're just preaching the Beatitudes. You're just preaching what you've done to the least of these, you've done to me,
and bring it into context and what's happening. But I think what's happening, like when downtown Cincinnati, when they push out all the homeless people, so there is in a secular world, there's politics involved in that.
Sure.
I'm saying that from my voice in the pulpit on Sunday, it's not political. It's wrong to get rid of these homeless people.
No, I think I'm just going to disagree. I think I'm just going to, I feel like that is, like,
I love it,
the right thing to say, but I don't know that it's like what I feel to be true. I'm just kind of like, no, I'm like I'm not, you never talk, like, the only time I've ever talked about or named a politician, especially, is in reference to naming the other politician. Right? Like, I'm never like, this person's bad, and then whatever. But like, when I did a sermon that was, I distinctly talked about defunding the police as a movement, right? And how, it wasn't necessarily about defunding it was about reallocating funds, but also because we don't reallocate the funds, all we're doing is we're putting our police that we love in a pressure cooker environment where there is going to be violence because we're not supporting our communities this way. And I think that's just political. I mean, you use the gospel as a lens for which to approach that, but like, I'm not going to say that wasn't a political sermon either.
Yeah, for me, it would not be.
Okay.
I love that. We agreed to disagree here.
Comrade Corwin said on the same video, I would settle for Christian education, including the Bible. I'm tired of all of these amoral atheists going to church just so they can be a high and mighty in prejudice and have nothing to back it up.
Is that a thing?
Oh, I think so.
Oh, I love it.
I'll read it again. I would settle for Christian education, including the Bible. I'm tired of all these amoral atheists going to church just so they can be high and mighty in prejudice and have nothing to back it up.
Okay, I get it. That's interesting. It threw me off when they said atheists, because I actually have like atheists at my church, right? Who are the best Christians sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah.
I do. Okay, I get it. At first I was like, oh wait. I get it.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I absolutely. I don't know that I would go as far as just to call everybody amoral atheists, because they have a belief system and they believe in what they believe in. So that, by definition, does not makes them not an atheist. It makes them a theist. But I get like the tone of why you would say that, and yeah, I get it. That's all I really have for that one.
This is one of the things that was difficult for me when I first pastored a church. It wasn't black. So the church I am now, it was the first primarily white church, predominantly white church that I ever preached at even. So what I noticed about a lot of my white members at the time is they needed church differently than a lot of the people of color in the church needed it. Well, they expressed their need differently. So a lot of them, the white members would say they come to church because that's what, it's what you do. Like, you're a member of the church. You go. What I noticed is that for a lot of people, their way of being involved and active and responsible in the church was like checking off things on the list, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. It's like, oh, this is my responsibility. Like, I'm provide cookies for coffee hour. I'm going to provide cookies for coffee hour. I'm going to provide, like, it was, okay, we do these things. Where a lot of my people of color would come in and in the middle of service, like, this is what's going on in my life. This is what's going on in my family. I need prayer for this, for that. And I know individually the relationships in the church, what's going on in white people's lives, but at that time, they would never express that. It was like very individualistic, like churches where you come for silence and prayer and hymn, and all of those things help them individually in a corporate setting deal with whatever they were dealing with. Whereas my people of color were coming to work that stuff out publicly and in concert with others. And so I used to preach a lot about us needing, requiring, desiring different things from God, and literally saying, like, helping, there is God in silence and what that looks like, but there could also be God in these other things. And I really saw people figuring out altering their unique individual spiritual journey because they were given permission to God differently. And so if people go to church and sitting in the silence and the meditation and the liturgy speaks to them and blesses them, and just believing can help, that's fine.
Yeah.
But then if others need something deeper, that's fine too. I don't try to reject people who don't require more depth or dismiss their experience and say it has to be like mine. Like, my church several of us went to Louisville to preach at my mother's church, which is basically the church that I grew up in. It's merged with another church. But several of the members, including some of the young people, went down, and it was really interesting to see their experience in this black church. It was just, especially when those women started shouting, like, yes. It was cool for them to get the experience, but then to also, see me preach differently.
Yeah.
And it was just cool.
Do you feel like one version of you preaching is the real you?
I feel like I've discovered so much more about myself by being able to preach in different settings. Like, I've just really learned a lot about myself and my experience with God. And I mean, my church service, if it goes 1 hour and 15 minutes, people are like, ugh. And we were 2 hours in Louisville, and they were like, wow, we got out early today. And
we have long worship. Ours is, if we get out in an hour, I blanked out and I missed half my sermon.
So how long does it usually last?
I would say a very typical worship is 1:15.
I feel like that's where we are.
An hour and a half is no problem. And I think all the time about that, because I'm always asking people, like, because I'm worried about it, because I always hear other pastors talk about, like, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I've been in places where you can't do this and you can't do that. And so I'm always constantly, like, concerned about that. And so I'm always asking the congregation, like, this is too long. And I always make the self-inflicting jokes about how long my sermons are. And everybody's like, no, we're fine. We're fine. They just don't schedule their lunches for 11:30. Like, just schedule it a little bit later. And it goes how long it goes. But I do, there is a big part of me that laments the lack of talk back culture in white church. It's just like, I mean, like, did you just hear what I said? Like,
preach it.
like, did you it does kind of suck knowing that they're going to go home, watch a Bengals game, throw their Cheetos in the air when there's a touchdown. But when, I say, you're called by name, it's like,
thank you.
You get a head nod. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Or a smile.
And it's just like, but I also get that's culture. And
yeah,
I'm not here to change culture necessarily. Okay, so the other thing I would say to this is it's kind of like how when people say, like, I don't want like Christians in Congress. It's just like, you'd feel differently if they were actual Christians. And that's the frustrating part about, like, everything we're doing right now. Like, the reason we're doing this podcast and is just like, if the Christians in Congress were actually doing Christianly things.
And I hate the idea of, like, it's Christian nationalism. It's the definition of, we have to get these type of Christians in these type of positions so they can control everything. Turn it over to God, and then the world will be like it's supposed to be. A true USA, a true church, a true. Whew.
The next comments we have are from a video we talked about understanding the nuance of perspective in the fight for justice.
I need to look at these. I'm not going to look at.
That's when we talked about what you're doing in this podcast is different than what I'm doing in this podcast, and that's beautiful. And we should name that. And we should
Ebony and Ivory.
Yep. And but for whatever reason, out of all the videos we put out, Cliff Dweller decided to post on this one, which seems pretty mild in all things considered. Ahem, comma, bullshit, period. Ooh. So they're allowed to say bullshit in review, but I'm not. Right.
Right.
But I just thought that was an interesting video, like, to have typed that on, like, why this one? And then Macman says, but find the connection between us all. If we divide ourselves, we lose power.
I feel like that that's the whole point. Like, people are always trying to divide. Like, that's what a culture war is. Mm-hmm. Is trying to convince us. In Black Reconstruction, W.E.B. Du Bois, this is damn near 100 years ago, says if Black people and poor white people actually sat down and talked and worked it out, they would realize the true enemy is capitalism. Mm-hmm. Because that's what keeps us. So, we're about to have, after the inauguration, there's about to be the richest cabinet in history. Billionaires who are deciding what is best for the poor people who elect this man. It's just crazy. Even Fred Hampton and the Black Panther Party, like, actively working to get the proletariat or working class people across race and gender to come together. That's what the Poor People's Campaign was. Like, our enemy is not a Mexican coming across the border. That's not what's causing my financial hardship.
Right. Yeah.
It's this system. But if I can constantly tell you, it's that man, it's that one,
exactly.
That one. So yeah, and then the really crazy part is that people of color are forced in this country to understand whiteness in a way just to survive. Mm. That, like, one of the jokes I always say is, like, watch Family Feud. So if you watch Family Feud, my Black family was on Family Feud, and they asked a question. We surveyed 100 people. You're going to a mall in Rhode Island, probably, and surveying these people. So I have to know not my answer for my culture, my climate, my community. I have to know the answer for probably 80 white people out of 100 that have been surveyed, what's this thing that they were going to do? And when you watch it, it's so interesting because there's a black host who will say that sometimes. And he will say to the black person, oh, that ain't up there, but I see where you're coming from. Because for us, that's exactly so, and that's what we've had to do. And James Baldwin talked about it. W. Du Bois talked about it. Like, it's a thing right now. It's like, okay, how Du Bois calls it a double consciousness. How do I see myself, but also how am I perceived by the systems of whiteness in this country? And so I know that, but then a lot of times we played a game at church one day called Black Card Revoked. And it's a card game and it has all these questions that most black people know. And we played it in mixed race companies. There's all these white people, all these black people, and the black people were killing it because of our culture. And it was interesting to see even really, really woke white people think, oh my God, there's this whole other world that I don't even, there's this whole song that people sing, the Negro National Anthem. There's these like lines from movies that everybody knows, and I've never seen it. It was very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, and that would happen to me. That would happen to, Wow. Very good. Okay.
That was fun. I'm going to look at the comments one day.
So moving on to the primary aspect of what I wanted to talk about today, I'm going to read it from script so we get all the facts straight. On December 4th, 2024, UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson was fatally shot outside the New York Hilton Midtown Hotel in Manhattan. That's just a long name for a hotel. Can we just get that out of the way? The suspect, 26-year-old Luigi Mangione, was apprehended on December 9th in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Mangione, an Ivy League graduate, allegedly harbored deep-seated animosity toward the health insurance industry, which he documented in a manifesto found upon his arrest. Mangione has been charged with multiple offenses, including murder with a firearm and stalking, and is currently detained at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. Initial vibes. What did you first think when you saw that story?
I said, oh shit. It was literally my first reaction. Then, and I saw it on Facebook, and I'm not gonna lie, what caught me off guard was like 90,000 people had laughed. Like that was,
I've seen that.
That was like day one, early on. That was my initial thought. Then when I saw him because of Blue Sky, like all the gays were like, oh my God, he's so hot. I was like, who's this guy that I keep seeing? And I realized that was him. And they had all these pictures of him with no shirt on, big, beautiful smile. And I was like, oh, the plot thickens. Because then, it's pretty privileged in this country also. So that made him even more of a, I don't know, folk hero. I like better. So yeah, that was my initial thought. But I also thought of that old phrase, the hate that hate begats, like the evil that evil begats. Like I'm a nonviolent person. Like I would even say nonviolent pacifist. Like I used to have guns. I got rid of them after whatever school shooting, but I get it. This is the way our country solves problems. This is the way the developing world solves problems, is violence. And Christians condone violence all the time for their own purposes. And there's lots of violence in the Bible. Just to put that out there. What did you think?
I had a very at first I was like, I can't believe this hasn't happened before now. But it was a very, like, I get it reaction, but also, like, really sad. And I think I was really sad mostly at the reactions.
I was sad at the laughing.
Yeah, like, it revealed, like, the depth of our brokenness, like, to the core, and how lost we are. And then it's, at the same time, it's just, like, I also get it. Like, I get how somebody can perceive that as a good thing. I don't understand. There are, like, on a logistical level, like, there are a lot of people who are like thinking that it was somehow a win. It's not a win. Like they're just gonna get the next CEO. Like what? Like it didn't do anything. And then I was just kind of pissed because we've had this system for how long now? And I think, and I posted it even on my Facebook page, like I have been to rallies and protests and marches about everything. I have never been invited to or heard or seen of a protest against the healthcare system.
And that would be more productive than this. And I'm with you. I get it. I don't like it. So, I'm a historian, like that's my thing, history.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I was wrestling with this, and when I say wrestling, I was wrestling with the celebration of it.
Yeah.
And that's just clearly because I'm a pastor. Compassion is kind of like where I lead from. When people do ugly things in church, and church people do ugly things, and then sometimes other church people want to cast them away, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, like this is the Forgiveness Institute. This is forgive us of our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Like they're human. So I don't believe ever in throwing any human away. I think Christians are changed people. That's one of my mantras. And so I was sad, but then I thought, like, what in history? And when John Brown led a slave revolt,
mm-hmm.
he was a white man who said slavery is wrong, and he armed himself and some other slaves, and some slaves, and they started killing people.
Mm-hmm.
And it scared the crap out of white people all over the country, especially in the South, to the point where they cracked down because the numbers were on the side of black people in the South.
Yeah,
they just outnumbered. And so the fear that it created even more devastation and destruction for black people. And people always say, well, how many slaves were killed? Slaves weren't killed because they were property, like they were valuable.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if your car messes up, you don't go blow it up.
Yeah.
Like you like that's how much wealth was there. And so it did spark some ugliness, but there were black people that celebrated John Brown.
Yeah. Because
he stood up to the system.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't win. And that's how Dr. King would be like, we shouldn't arm, like, we won't win this with guns because they have more guns than us.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but what it did was bring attention. And so the optimist in me has to say, will this at least bring attention?
Yeah.
To, we've got to do something better. Because a lot of times we don't care when poor people die. But when rich and powerful people die, like I saw when they were bringing that guy in the other day, they had 30 police officers around him with guns.
Mm-hmm.
And he just looks like a little boy, honestly. It's like, oh, wow, this is crazy. So will the fear, now that the rich and powerful feel, I don't think it will, but will it change, or will it ignite the mass swell of people to say, hey, you think this is wrong? Well, let's look at where this came from.
Yeah.
That's the hope.
It's interesting that you bring up like the initial ugliness of it, like, because the same thing happened with Hitler.
Yep.
It wasn't until the first assassination attempt, like Hitler was always batshit crazy.
Always.
And he was always violent. I mean, we could go into a whole history on Hitler, but it wasn't until his life was actually physically threatened in the flesh that he went crazy. Like,
yeah,
when the whole, like, everything happened. The Hitler that you know now happened after,
out of fear,
because he got paranoid. He was mentally ill and got even worse.
Drugs.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it didn't have. I mean, he was horrible before then, but like, what he did after that moment. So I think it's an important and relevant point to make. I know that the counter argument is, I guess, the ethics of it, because there's like, I was a ethics major.
I didn't know.
ethics and justice. It was
In seminary?
in seminary. That was my master's.
Wow.
Yeah, that was my degree.
Powerful.
And yeah, I went for divinity, and I was like, we've got enough divinity. Like, let's try some ethics in the pulpit and see what happens. Right. Not
a whole other episode.
It's a whole, yeah, no, we could do it. But like, there's like the really just basic like trope of ethics is like you're riding in a school bus full of children, and you have nowhere else to go. Somebody's in the middle of the road. Do you run that person in the middle of the road over, knowing that you're going to kill them? Or do you swerve, potentially killing the 12 kids you have in the school bus? The difference between that scenario, and I think like you can stage that scenario in different ways. Like there's a cliff off to the side. So you are
yeah. You're going to kill everybody. Yeah.
But you can. So you could say, I think the alternative point of view is that by killing this one CEO who has killed countless numbers of people. I mean, we can go to the stats of UnitedHealthcare is the largest private health insurers in the world, covering 26 million. They reported a record-breaking $324 billion in revenue in 2022. Has the highest claim denial rates among major insurers, and a whistleblower this week just claimed that there is in fact a denial quota for the company. So we're not talking about good people. Like, we are talking about evil. We're talking about monsters. And so this person is in charge of an organization that has killed thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And so the thought is, if we can kill one person, that potentially we're saving all this. But we're not. You didn't.
Because the system is still there.
Yeah. You didn't actually. So you just killed someone.
And God, this is one of those things I haven't talked to a lot of my friends about, because we disagree in some of the language that they're using. But it's not that I disagree. Anyway, it's not just the people that have died because their claims were denied. Like, when you look at the system of, and not just healthcare, but we're talking about healthcare now. We look at the system for the CEO. Their job is to make money for the shareholders, and their job is secured by making money for the shareholders, and they are rewarded by making lots of money for themselves. It's also the people who work in the customer service center that don't make that much money. Like, they are part of the violence of the system too. And when these are legal killings that a company is allowed to do because of the system that we have in place for healthcare, like, if it's not regulated how denials happen, if there's no accountability there, then what they are doing, and that's what people say, oh, well, they're doing, this is legal, but then you have to change the law.
Yeah.
Like, then you have to change the system. So it's so that's the issue. It's
capitalism.
It's capitalism.
It's
Fettered.
Yeah.
And when you look at what CEOs make now compared to 50 years ago, it is 50 years ago, they made a fraction. They made much more than their lowest paid workers, but it was a fraction of what they make now compared to their lowest.
Plus the bonuses.
And plus the stocks, the bonuses, the use of the private jet, the this, the that, like all these things.
This guy's salary, when I saw his salary, I was shocked at how low it was. $4 million.
Because it was the bonuses and stocks, and that's how you make the money. Yeah. Because that's the tax thing too. Like, it's taxed differently and that also pisses me off when these people are like taking up for the rich. Because, it's like, oh, it's fair.
They're job creators.
Yeah. And like, look at and then, oh, I don't think they should have to pay more taxes. I do. You tell me, Derek, you're broke as hell right now. If we pay you $1 million, but you're going to have to pay 50% of that in taxes, I would gladly do that, as opposed to the whatever I pay now to barely make it off whatever I make. Like, and it's just greed. And now, do I think killing that man was the right thing to do? No, do think it brought attention to an issue that I think we will talk about for a little bit, and then nothing will come of it.
But here's the point of like what we have to wrestle with, I think, is if this murder, or I don't know if you want to call it murder. I mean, it feels like a weird word to say here because so many people, assassination or I don't know. But it feels like even if the result is that now we create a nonviolent movement, specifically around healthcare, it still was sparked by this.
Mm-hmm.
And so the ethics question of it is, was it a success? Like, even if we become even if we started this revolution that's nonviolent and we take down the healthcare system, it still happened because this happened. And so,
and that's why people do stuff like that. Like, John Wilkes Booth thought that he was doing a noble and beautiful thing by killing Lincoln. Like, he thought he would go down in history as this great patriot. We don't know what's going to happen in the next few years, honestly. Yeah, right. But like that happens. I mean, the way that World War II is taught, at least the way that I remember writing a paper on the nuclear bombs, like in the 6th grade, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not taught, and I did not write that paper from the place of, oh my God, this really caused a lot of death and devastation to a community for generations. I wrote it that America was so great, we came up with this bomb and this ended the war.
Ooh. That's a tough one to think back on.
Exactly. Because
it's not a lot of Americans remember.
Yeah.
Though.
And when you're in this thing where people want to be so like, there's good and there's evil, there's right and there's wrong, and this thing, if it was done in the name of good, then it's a good thing, and that's what should have happened. And it's gross, and it's one of those things that's why I like history so much. Is I used to think it was finite, but what happens when we learn more and we discover more and we experience more? And so the way I think about that very same issue then is different than the way I think about that issue now. But then people would say, well, it ended the war.
Yeah.
But at what cost?
Yeah, here we are all these years later and everybody's got atom bombs.
Yep.
And we're all just scared all the time.
Yep. And at what cost? And what did it end? Like, what still remains?
Yeah.
That conflict, as it were. But think of the world that we live in now compared to that. It's ugly, it's icky, it's vile. So I get what you're saying. And it's one of those things that we have to always wrestle with. And why do we need this? Like, why does it have to be so big, so crazy, so violent for people to wake up? Why did Breonna Taylor and George Floyd have to happen for people to start saying Black Lives Matters? Only for 4 years later for Walmart to say, no, we're getting rid of our DEI stuff. Like, I remember
next podcast
after 2020, like, I remember being in Walmart and they came on the loudspeaker like, we hear you, we see you, Black Lives Matter. Like, that was in
they
Walmart.
Did not.
They did. I was in there shopping like, this is weird.
So like some manager that was
it was like
sawing you specifically on the security camera.
And every so many minutes it played it. And now I think, okay, less than 4 years later, we've killed that. So that's why I say, like, this type of stuff.
So then what is the nonviolent alternative? I mean, like, you think about this and you think about how harmful the healthcare system has been for so long. And then also through the lens that we've never had really a true nonviolent movement against it. And any politician who's ever run as healthcare with a core issue has lost. Like, what do we do?
And that's why they lose. How many billions did you say that they?
$324 billion back in 2022.
So take that, and I wonder how much of that is spent on lobbying.
It's there. Okay, so this is going to be way too personal, but it's like it's infuriating to me because so I chat GBT'd the like, can you put these in a bullet point or specifically for a podcast?
Right.
And like, I can't not hear Bernie Sanders in it.
Yeah.
And that's what's frustrating for me, is because I was a Bernie Sanders supporter, and like, I'm just gonna, like, everybody should just wear a Bernie shirt that just says, I told you so. Because everything he ever fought for back in 2016 is just commonplace, like what we want now. But like I can't hear, like, it's almost like word by word. Like, you can like say it in like, just despite spending more per capita than any other country in the U.S., has the worst outcomes in areas such as maternal mortality and life expectancy among developed nations. Like, and you can just hear Bernie and his Brooklyn accent. I can't do a Brooklyn accent. The infrastructure.
I was about to say loud and raspy.
And like, so I don't want to bring it just back to Bernie Sanders. It's just frustrating that, like you said, it takes to this point when there has been people that have been pointing this out, and they're in a certain like lens, like persecuted for it.
Absolutely. Persecuted by people within their party and people without.
Yeah.
Like, these issues are not, and that's the crappy part of history, is you always think that people do better over time. Mm-hmm. Societies do better over time. Technology does better over time, but people are always crappy. And it's like, why?
And that's our podcast.
Yeah, and like, why is Roe v. Wade a thing again? Like, why is, like, 50 years after, why are we still dealing with this? Even when you have victories, there's always people trying to drag you back down into their ideas. And unfortunately, and it sucks, but it's the only way it happens, is small incremental victories slowly over time. And it sucks. Like, it sucks.
It sucks because it's actually simple. It's as simple as if everybody turned off the news.
Yep.
If everybody turned off the news all at once, the world would change overnight. Like, almost overnight. Maybe not overnight, but it all goes back to empire, like, and the media empire of it all. Back when I was in seminary, one of my professors asked us to gauge. We had to like write about Black Lives Matter through the lens of media, and whether or not Black Lives Matter wasn't manufactured by the media, but if it was allowed through, like, there are certain like, we'll let this one go through so that the rest of everything that's going on in the world isn't on people's mind. Like, if we can allow the peasants of the world to just talk about Black Lives Matter, they're not going to also be talking about the poor people. They're not going to be talking about healthcare, because they're only going to be talking. And so that was like a real eye opener for me. It's like, oh damn, that actually kind of happened. Like, and it's not to discredit like the Black Lives Matter movement, but it was just like, yeah, that's all we talked about for a good number of years. At least in my circle, that's all we talked about for a good number of years. When I just feel like if we would have always talked about these things, like, obviously, right? Like, that's an easy thing to say, but
yeah, it's crazy. And it's I've talked about it before. I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast. Like, I finally like got rid of Twitter. But it took me forever. After Musk bought it, a lot of people were like, oh, we gotta get rid of this crappy. And it is crappy after Musk bought it. But Black Twitter was such a community and such a connection. And Black people do what we do, is when we are in spaces that people don't want us to be in, we figure out how to survive collectively within these spaces.
Making a way out of no way, Monica Coleman.
Exactly. Like, literally, like, because if I only went places where people wanted me, then I would not go very many places. So I have to
come here.
Yep. I could not care about that. So so it's so when Must bought it. We were, and I say we, like all the Black people, the Negro collective. Where do we go? Like this is what, like, and we all have to go there because this community is important. I found out about Trayvon Martin on Twitter. It was not on the news.
Yeah, wow.
I found out about, because it forced the news to pay attention because they kept talking about it and they kept saying, and they were tagging news. They're not talking about this. There was a 17-year-old Black boy who was killed, who did this, who did that. And they kept it going. Philando Castile. I'm watching one morning, I'm like, what is this? I just kept seeing somebody in their car, like in a white t-shirt. And I'm like, what is this? And I finally watched. And how many people have recorded and put stuff out there that never would have happened, that never would have made it onto the news had people not forced. Right. So that's literally the whole point of, like, say their name. Black Lives Matter was at the end of a tweet. It was a hashtag. 3 Black women, one of them queer, Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And it pisses me off when, like you said, people pick up on something to sensationalize it for whatever reason. And when people ask me about it, I'm always like, it became a political movement. It became something to say to make you look woke on your bio. I said, but for many people, it is a cry for justice. It is a cry to be seen as a human being, that Black Lives Matter. My life matters. Yeah. Like this is a thing. And
so, like, there's no, like, it feels like we live in a society where you can't have that.
Exactly.
Because it's always going to be taken and sensationalized.
Exactly. And it sucks. And so, Black, we find our spaces and we do what we've always done. We survive, but then we also, it's Martin Luther King in Memphis getting killed while he was there to support garbage men with a sign, "I am a man." It's sad that 4 years after Breonna Taylor, still the human and personhood of Black people, people of color, and it's just going to get worse. It's just going to get worse.
Gosh, I remember just the feeling of listening to other people talk about Black Lives Matter, and just the frustration. You can't say no to Black Lives Matter without saying that Black lives don't matter. Like, they're like, you can't go, like, somebody can't say to you Black Lives Matter and you go, no, all lives matter. Like, by definition, you just told me no to Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, you're getting caught up in the wrong thing. Because why is there the need for people to say this?
Yeah.
Like, why is there the need for people? That's always the anti-open and affirming thing. It's, well, all people are welcome and everybody is loved. And it's like, yeah, but why then do the queer people need a special shout out?
Right.
Like, but if you've never been in that position, or you've never thought what it might be to be oppressed, James Baldwin, God of the Oppressed, not James Baldwin, James Cone, God of the Oppressed, right? Black Liberation Theology, Black Theology, and Black Liberation, all those books are basically how to help the least of these see God in them and recognize that God is on their side. And that's not, that's not Christian nationalism. People would have us believe that the CEO of UnitedHealthcare's life was more valuable than the homeless person on the street because he was the CEO and because he was rich.
Yeah.
And that's not right.
Yeah. I think I'm going to be thinking about this for a long time.
Hell yeah.
I think that there's no way around it. Like, even like the point that, like, even if something changes because this,
it's still,
it would have changed because of violence, and that's tough to reconcile with. But like, it's not Jesus. Like, even if that is what happened, like, Jesus never did that. Like, Jesus never asked that of us. Jesus never did it. And I preached, I mean, we're in the middle of Advent right now, and I preached about this on Sunday. And I talked about John the Baptist, he's make the way for the Lord, prepare the way for the Lord. And everybody's like, how do you do that? And he talks to the tax collectors in the crowd. And what does he tell them? He doesn't tell them to stop being tax collectors or even to give back everything that they stole. He just told them, like, from now on, just collect what you're owed. He goes to the soldiers in the crowd, and he doesn't tell them to put their swords down. He doesn't even tell them to leave the army. That's what I wanted him to say. Like, John, like, this is your chance. Like, tell them to nope. He says, just stop, like, oppressing people. Stop. And it's just like there are times where I want violence in the face of evil.
So
to be right.
So this is really gonna mess you up.
Oh shit.
So what then? Because even non-violence was a weapon.
Yeah.
So I mean, and Dr. King had to learn this from Preston, a queer person. I was like, we had to learn this because Dr. King saying he was non-violent while he had armed guards sitting in front of his house.
Yeah.
And Preston was like, hey, dude. Mm-hmm. True nonviolence is true nonviolence, and it's not passive; it's active. And so, nonviolence was weaponized. So, what happened? King was a master of using the media for their good. Also, it was a much different world. There were 3 or 4 TV stations. Mm-hmm. Everybody got the newspaper. That was very boom. Here's a paper. Here's a picture. Mm-hmm. And then in some cities, you got a morning and afternoon. There were multiple newspapers. There was always a black newspaper. So. 1963 Birmingham Children's Campaign, when you see children being washed down the streets, mm-hmm. all they're doing is marching. When you see Dr. King and Abernathy on their knees praying, and the police dogs are brought on them, and they're beaten, all they're doing is praying. And so you're literally taking the violence of the oppressor and showing people, look, they ain't doing nothing but praying. They ain't doing nothing but marching. They ain't doing nothing but trying to eat at a lunch counter. Like these very simple things. These people are becoming so violent towards them, mm-hmm. and they're seeing it on the, they've seen it on the news. They've seen it in the paper. And we only have 4 stations, not like we have now. 60 million people are seeing on the 6 o'clock news what's happening.
Yeah,
and that's why I say it's gonna mess you up, because then that's the violence that helped to bring about the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, Bloody Sunday. And they use kids, and that messes with people. I mean, I'm talking middle school kids. Mm-hmm. Like, people knew what could happen to them.
Yeah,
and the religious leaders, it was like, well, it's not like, and this is strategic. Parting the Waters, Taylor Branch. Pillars of Fire, those are 2, like, there are couple books about America during the King years, and it talks about the strategy mm-hmm. of these movements, because so many people think that people just woke up one day and said, hey, let's march. Like, no, like, there was strategy. Like, they went where they went and did what they did.
Like Rosa Parks just, like, exactly. One day decided to get on a bus,
exactly.
Right? Yeah. Which is not what happened.
And Howard University is pumping out civil rights attorneys that are going to fight these things. Like, it's this whole thing. And so, and again, I'm not advocating for violence, but so much of the human experience throughout all of humanity, violence has been a part of it. And that's the gross part, is when people talk about what is righteous violence and what is not. So even King, even in a non-violent movement, it was the violence that helped to bring about some of the change, because it was in response to the turning the other cheek. So that's why the turning the other cheek was not passive, which is why King was saying nonviolence has worked for us. Now, by the time he was killed in 1968, it was a different America. It was a different culture. Black Panther Party, who started in Oakland, where black people walking down the street just getting annihilated by the police. They're like, wait a minute. The violence always comes from one group onto another. The Black Panthers, who were not violent, the media tried to convince people that they were because they wore black and had guns were literally standing guard just to threaten the police. Don't hurt innocent people with your violence.
Yeah.
Because I'm standing here. It's all nuance, and it's all crazy, and it's all icky. And and so when you're a Luigi, or when you're a person, we always talk about people being radicalized.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what happens when you come to these realizations of what violence has done? Then you think you are doing something good.
Mm.
Ooh.
Yikes.
Fix it, Jesus.
Please.
Glory to God.
Please. But I do think that there's a difference between using violence
absolutely
and being violent.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's
using the tools you have to, it is using the other people's hate against them. Is what it was. It's holding up a mirror.
Yeah.
Saying, look, America, look what they're doing. But it's amazing how people can convince themselves of stuff when they're spiraling, or when they're festering, or when they are like Luigi.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, I can talk myself into all kinds of stuff. Like, I think carrot cake is healthy. It's healthier than other cake because it has carrots in it. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And it struck me as I was giving that sermon, because I started thinking about John's response, which is not the one that I want.
Mm-hmm.
It's John's response was so passive. It felt like it was, but it's like, it is the way of Jesus. It's like, as an abolitionist theologian, I am all for overturning the tables, the name of this podcast. And then there are moments like John on the banks of the Jordan River where I'm reminded that actually, Jesus overturned tables, but he only did it once.
That we know of.
But even in the context of the ministry you know about, that also has to matter to us.
Absolutely. Can't be the only thing you do.
Yeah.
And too often I lead with overturning the table. I'm getting way better now that I'm older. But when I was a young preacher, I started preaching when I was 19. And so I was often the youngest in the room. In the AME church, you can get a license at 18. So I was 19. I was almost as young as you could be and start public ministry. And I had all these bold ideas, and, it was an oppressive place, a system to pastor in. And I would, be loud and wrong sometimes. And, but
you ever watch one of your old sermons? Just,
oh my God,
that is incorrect, sir. That is just wrong. I
have binders of them. And even post-seminary sermons, I'm like, I don't think that anymore. I don't, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's dangerous when people were taught something when they were 7, and at 50, they still believe the same thing, or at 70, they still and anytime somebody says, the gospel is very clear, well, then you clearly haven't read the gospel.
Yeah.
Because there's this verse may be very, the literal interpretation of this verse may be very clear. But once we jump into that thing.
So you mentioned the word nuance a little bit ago. Is there nuance to say that non-violent or violence is ever okay?
What, Reverend Derek? Or
let's go Rev Derek first, and then Derek after.
Reverend Derek would I want to believe in the words of Dr. King. I want to turn the other cheek. I started this, I want to be a nonviolent pacifist. I want to.
Yeah.
I desire that. But I also know the world that I live in. And one of the first things...
Is this Derek now?
Yeah, this is Derek. One of the first things that happened after, this new election, and people are emboldened, and everybody knows where I am on 11 o'clock Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm petrified of certain things, and I hate to make decisions out of fear. But do I need a gun? Do I need, some type of protection? Is someone going to throw an air tag in my car and follow me?
I have nightmares about this.
Yeah.
Literal nightmares, because the one thing that I cannot escape from is if, God forbid, that ever happened to our church, and I could have had a gun under the pulpit the whole time and could have stopped that person. And instead, how many people, like, I literally have nightmares about it. I have my gun still. So like I'm like, in theory, a pacifist, but like I can't get rid of that gun. It's like hidden in our house. It's like, but like,
It doesn't make you feel guilty because it
makes me feel guilty all the time.
That's the way I feel
all the time. But then again, if it was just me living in my home, like fine. But
Right.
my wife,
and that's the guilt for me. Because the guilt for me is that I felt safer when I had a gun.
Yeah.
And that was guilty because I know it's a false sense.
Mhm.
But it's still a comfort. It was a comfort.
Yeah.
So
well, what I would say, I mean, the only grace I give myself is my dad's a big gun guy, and
my father's a cop, so I grew up with guns everywhere. Like I respect them. I just
he's the one that taught me to shoot, and he would always get mad at me because this is super violent, but it's supposed to be 2 to the chest, or the head.
Yeah,
that's like the pattern. That's like the typical pattern, and I would always do 1, 2, and then I would practice missing the head. Just so that, like, internally, it gave me this false sense of security that in that moment I could make the decision. How messed up is that?
Yeah, I have a friend who has a gun. He's like, I've never shot it, and I'm like,
that's bad. If you have a gun,
dangerous.
If you have a gun, you do have to go to a range. There are other people that can get seriously hurt if you have a gun and you've never shot,
including you.
So either don't have a gun or know how to use it.
Exactly.
Please.
Exactly. Because that's what I was like, dude, this is not TV.
Yeah.
It's not, don't start none. It's like, this is real. So yeah, so is violence ever right? I believe Derek believes I have the right to protect myself and my family.
Sure.
My Reverend Derek.
But then the question is, does Luigi, does he have the right to do that because he was protecting the 26 million Americans?
I could see that people would say that. I don't.
I can't.
Yeah,
I can't go that far.
I can't. And I mean, I struggle with calling the guy, the CEO, a murderer, even though I get it. Like, I struggle with it.
I don't.
I know.
That one I don't.
Yeah, and I get that too. It's like I always get there, but I don't know if it's the eternal optimism in me, if it's he's only allowed to do what he's allowed to do. If he's not the only murderer, if he's a murderer, then like the systems in place and the politicians who allow these systems, and like when I talk about slow incremental change, this type of stuff, like making $400 billion doesn't happen overnight.
Sure.
Like, that's chipping away at rights and regulations that slowly builds up over time. It's compound interest, right? So there were millions of decisions that have been made since UnitedHealthcare was a thing that helped them to get to this point. And what does that mean?
Yeah. I feel like I've gotten nowhere.
Church mothers would say, just pray over it. But then it's like, that's not enough.
The whole reason this podcast started was this.
But there is something that happens when you discuss and when you do pray and when opportunities like present itself, like changes at every level. It's not just at the CEO level. It's the whistleblower. Like the bravery of that person will chip away at something. Like, but it's always a constant battle, and that's what pisses me off.
Well, it's like it's a baseball game.
God, baseball games are so long.
And baseball games are long and they're slow. And sometimes you swing for the fences of abolition, and sometimes you have to punt the ball just to get on base.
I love that analogy.
Most of the time, you're going to strike out.
I love that analogy. I mean, yeah, think about it. Like in baseball, you're considered a great hitter if you bat like 30.
You can have a 10-year career in the big leagues, batting 200.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And like 30 is like amazing. Did that happen? 300?
300, yeah. 300 is like you're real good at 300.
But that literally
average is 250.
30%, right?
Yeah.
That's what that means.
Well, it's the same thing with football. You think about football, and the same analogy holds. You only have to be successful on 25% of your plays on an offense to get that first down.
And you will not pass any class with the 25.
I used to teach marching band, and I would tell them like how much smarter we were than the football players, because if we did anything as a marching band at a 25% success.
When are y'all playing? I don't even know what song this is. One of them every 4 counts.
And I would do that. I would line them up, and I'd be like, okay, everybody but you. And like it'd be like a 50-member horn line, and I'd be like, all right, so 45 of you play a B flat chord, and then 5 of you don't. Pick a different chord.
Something else.
And it sounds off, but that's true that we've gotten ways that track.
But no, that's just that's it. Like, then I love the baseball because like baseball games, I go for the food, which is not even great. It's just like nostalgic. A $20 hot dog. Yeah, I'm sitting. But it takes forever, and then something happens, and you're like, yes, something happened, woo, and then nothing.
Yeah.
For a long time.
The baseball game of justice.
I think we solved all the world problems. This is like a 2-part episode.
Yeah.
Like, stay tuned for the continuing saga of As the Bible Turns. As the tables turn.
Well, everybody, I think we can end it here. I'm so dejected right now. I do not feel any better.
Do you drink?
I do, yeah.
Well, that'll make you feel better. And Christmas is only I don't know when this posts, but Christmas is coming soon. So you watch A Muppet Christmas Carol, and you drink hot chocolate with bourbon, and that's where you feel better.
But okay, all right, let's keep this podcast going for one more minute, because do you remember when Tina Fey did that on SNL? Tina Fey, I forget what movement we were in the middle.
And I definitely watch SNL all the time.
There was that thing where the world's going to hell in a handbasket, and she's eating cake.
Absolutely.
Like this is because that was the whole thing, and she got canceled for that.
That's my self-care.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Like you have to. I'm on this whole thing right now of really promoting, encouraging people to find a creative outlet.
I started sketching, by the way.
Oh, good. I love that.
Disney characters.
I love that. I just bought a book on like Disney characters, like how to draw them. So I'm going to do that. But that's what because that's what I found during COVID, and it's been really just like helpful. And I used to feel guilty, like there's so many terrible, shitty things happening. I shouldn't just be sitting here watching TV or sitting here. Like I should be doing something. But my therapist and, myself came to the realization of I have to take care of myself.
You know what the rudest thing my therapist ever did to me?
What?
They wrote down on a piece of paper and like slid it over as if it was like my new salary.
I was about to say a salary in a movie. Yeah. I love that. How's this sound?
And and it's on the piece of paper. I still have this piece of paper, and it says, "What would be enough?" ?
Because and I think that's a big clergy problem.
Yeah,
there's always it's literally God, and there's always something that needs to be done. Someone needs something, and if you've ever struggled with insecurity or inadequacy, and there's always something to be doing. So I should do this. I should do this. I should do this. I should do nonprofit work. So it's literally my whole life is always this much work, this much time.
Yeah.
And it's also easy to always do instead of And when I'm literally addicted to work.
Me too.
So
to be fair, I think you might be the same, that doing work does fill the cup.
oh my God, that's the problem.
Yeah.
It's because it does. I'm like, this brings me joy and peace.
Taking a nap does not fill the cup. I'm not happy. I don't feel better. It's not good for me.
Yeah, naps take me. I never take them. I'll just wake up and say,
that'll preach. That'll preach.
I woke up the other day and said, oh, okay. I just wiped the drool because I was sleeping so well. So I've tried to find stuff that's not work, which for me is like creativity.
Where you're still doing
and like something like comes of it. And I always like to keep like different projects. I like to keep some that are huge that take forever. And then some that may a couple of days, and then okay, right now I'm going to draw whatever.
A baseball game of self-care.
And I'm just gonna draw it. Yes, because I need a victory right now. I'm doing these art kits for MLK Day. I have like MLK that I put on campus and selling them for people. Like instead of, because MLK Day is the inauguration.
Yeah.
So instead of sitting around on the inauguration being all sad and, complaining and weird, turn on some music and paint Martin Luther King on Martin Luther King Day and, have fun. Like,
I'll be at the Freedom Center.
Oh, that's good. Do you see what the UCC is partnering with Preparers of the Breach and a million other people? Yeah, I couldn't say it because the last time, because we hadn't been announced yet. But on Inauguration Day in Memphis, which is the last place Dr. King spoke when he was killed, in honor of Dr. King's life, they're like, no, we're not letting this day be co-opted by the crazy. So it's Karen Georgia with the UCC Church. She's general minister, president of UCC Church. Bishop Yvette Plunder with the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. Dr. William Barber, Repairs of the Breach, and the UU Church.
Okay.
There's like a bunch, and they're all going down. My boss wants me to go. I really don't want to.
You don't want to?
It's not that I don't want to. I do want to. But I don't know if I have the mental, emotional capacity to do it. So
I get that.
We'll see. And if I do,
I mean, I don't get that, but I understand.
Yeah, like I really want to. But travel is like really. I love to travel, but I have like ebbs and flows because it can be really stressful.
You know what we should do?
What?
We should do a podcast on a road trip.
On the road.
Just you and me in a car. Just talking about this.
See the USA in our Chevrolet. It was a commercial back in the 50s. Like before the interstate. It was see the USA. I wasn't alive in the 50s, but I've seen commercials.
Okay. Well, if this is, I think this is coming out today. I'm trying to. We'll see how long it uploads. But wishing everybody a Merry Christmas. Spend time with family. Do some self-care.
Keep hope alive.
Yeah. And we will see you next time on Overturning.
It'll be the new year, right?
No, we have one more Friday. We have the Friday after Christmas.
Okay. Christmas is next week. Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Christmas is Tuesday. Well, Christmas Eve is Tuesday.
Yeah.
So... thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any comments, please leave them, and we might even read them. Woo-hoo! So this has been Overturning Tables, the podcast. I've been Jonathan.
I'm still Derek.
And you have a great day. We still don't have a sign off.
Yeah, we got one. We just need to push a button and it turns over the tables. Hold on.
Awesome!
Oh, no, that's not it. Well, could have used that one earlier.